Parents of Reddit, what was the best lie that your child ever told you, that you knew was a lie, and just wanted to see how big of a hole they would put themselves in? My sister-in-law asked her daughters, aged 7 and 5, who had unraveled all the toilet paper. They both said not me. The 7-year-old then said which toilet was it, to which the 5-year-old replied the upstairs one. My 4-year-old daughter used a marker to write on the couch last weekend. When confronted, she denied it and blamed her 1-year-old brother. Her story started to fall apart when I pointed out that she wrote her name on the couch. The absolute worst, which has been told over and over by all my children at some point in time. Do you have to poop? No. 2 minutes later you're cleaning up their filthy lies. When trying to potty train my daughter, she would blame the dog for pooping in her diaper. Back when I was really young, earlier than 3, I would blame the other kid when I got caught doing something bad. I was an only child at the time. We had no neighbors with children. That just sounds really lonely, actually. My 2 were quite young, 4 and 6 years old, and they had been squabbling. The youngest decided to bang her own head on the headboard of the bed, scream her brother's name and start to cry. She didn't know I was walking into the room to talk to them as it happened, so I'll let her go on for a minute crying, telling me how her brother hit her in the head. When I finally told her I saw the whole thing, she started to really cry because she knew she was now in trouble for lying, and she had a bump on her head. I do not know what possessed her to do that. My oldest is quite a bit older now and had a real whopper involving his epic day playing League of Legends. The whole day was a lie and he got into trouble for it. Tell your kid to 1v1 me. I was the kid in this one, so I was probably 4 or 6, somewhere in that zone, and I ate all of my mom's Dove chocolates. A big mistake, one I wouldn't dare do even today. So when little me, with a chocolate covered face, was confronted, I told them no, I didn't eat them. My mother threatened to call Jesus himself and ask if I did or not. So I told her, well, he's gonna say I did, but he's lying, and that was my first blasphemy. I love this. Opposite end of the spectrum, but my dad told me that the Titanic sank in a small river in my hometown just as we were starting unit on the Titanic in the 1st grade. Made an butt of myself during that unit. In 3rd grade I told my mother that we went to the moon for our field trip because I complained that the Wisconsin Historical Museum was too boring and we'd been there before. When she said she couldn't wait to see pictures, I had to break her heart and inform her that our teacher forgot to bring the moon camera. See, that's just unprofessional on your teacher's part. When getting ready to leave my parents' house, my 4-year-old daughter asked to bring home a random toy, which I said no. Next day, I find the toy in her jacket pocket. Extreme punishment ensues due to the fact that it's borderline stealing. Never asked my parents to take toy, and since I told her no and she did it anyways. 3 whole days later, with no movies, iPad, and favorite toys, I talked to my dad, who stated that he put the toy in her pocket to take home. My little princess thought my dad would get in trouble if I found out the truth, so she essentially just took one for the team. So, it's kind of the best lie she's told so far. I volunteer at a local ski resort on patrol duties. My kids from my first marriage are teenagers now. My son has completely lost track of my schedule and got the weekends confused. I was early on the mountain when he was under impression I was at my work in a hospital. This is important detail. He was grounded for some shenanigans earlier in the season, from going to the mountain without me or my brother. Long story short, he was sure I'll never know he went out with few of his friends for a couple of runs. Sure enough, he got hurt jumping in the park, and I was there to pick up his sorry butt. He was still a little post-concussive and hasn't recognized me or any of my friends with me. His only request, knowing very well he's hospital bound, was not to send him to the one I work at, since he wasn't supposed to be running the slopes with his pack of idiots. Yup, busted. I have 2 younger sisters. The older of the 2 was about 7 at the time. She went on a week-long rampage of doing things she knew she shouldn't and blaming our youngest sister, who was about 3 years old, for it all. She colored on our bed sheets and the carpet and covered the marks with clear tape in order to hide them. She even cut our younger sister's ponytail off, handed her the hair and the scissors before my mom entered the room and confidently said she cut her own hair. Mom, we still laugh about this all time and she's 16 now. late to the party, but my little brother once stripped down, fully naked, and started sprinting up and down the street. He was running over lawns and down the sidewalk when my sister came and told them. He told them the wind blew his clothes off. Great one for child or drunk. I have a newborn at home. For those that have had newborns, you know that in the first month, every smile is just gas. That's a horrible, horrible lie built on a platform of burning lies. My little sister once lied to me that my friends had come, while I was in the bathroom, to invite me to go play soccer with them at the park. I went, I saw, I came back. She was playing my Pokemon game, and had deleted my save file and replaced it with hers. Your sister is a C. So many kids writing on walls and stuff. When my son was in pre-K, 4-year-olds, he came home from school one day and was very quiet and sad. Like an hour later I finally got him to tell me what was wrong, and he told me about how his whole class got to go to the zoo on a field trip that day, but since I didn't give him a check and a permission slip, he was not allowed to go. I thought I remembered sending that in, but I was working and in school full time, so I couldn't find it and couldn't remember for sure. He teared up a bit as he described how he had to stay behind with the babies, and he got to color some pages, but he wished he could have gone on the trip too. At this point I was almost in tears myself. Why didn't they call me to get me to bring in the form? How could they leave him behind and not at least try to get in touch with me? I would totally have driven back from work and taken care of it. The next morning I marched in, full of righteous indignation, ready to raise heck with the director, only to see, posted on the bulletin board on the way in, a group photo from the zoo trip, with my son, smiling front and center. Tricky little bastard. Once I desired a toy in a store, but my mother said no. Disappointed, but undeterred, I hatched an ingenious plot to acquire the item for myself. I ripped open the package and stuffed the toy in my pocket. After mom finished paying for whatever balls she had purchased, probably food or something similarly grown up, I raced my little legs as fast as they could carry me outside ahead of her, deposited the toy on the ground. My deception was laid out none too soon, for shortly after my mother got outside herself, having hurried to find out where I had run off to. Now was the time to spring my trap. Feigning surprise, quite expertly, I might add, I shouted, "Look, someone left a toy out here. Mom, can I keep it?" My mother, sadly, was not fooled by my cunning plan, and readily identified the brand new toy laying on the ground was the exact same toy I had been begging for not 10 minutes earlier. Now mom, being a bit evil, hatched a plot of her own to teach me a lesson. She marched me back inside, presented me and the toy to the store owner, and forced me to apologize. The store owner looked at me with a grim expression, and said he'd love to forgive me, but he has no choice but to call the police. Presumably mom was winking and nodding like heck with this, and so the town cop, singular, small town, was called, and I was arrested for the first time in my life. Placed in back, my mother somberly waved and said she'd write to me in jail, and so I proceeded to what I assumed was my permanent exile to prison. After about 5 minutes of the police car driving, it stopped. I hadn't paid attention due to the sheer amount of tears and wailing I had unleashed. The door opened, and I was home, and there was mom, trying very hard to not laugh while looking stern. She suggested I never steal anything again, and we went inside, and so ended my brief foray into the criminal underworld, though I did get an ice cream. Your mom sounds like she's awesome. Not my child but a friend's child. He was 3 at the time, but I didn't know that. I assumed he is 5 or 6. He sat beside me and started explaining everything he and his cousin do in the school. Every single detail, like teacher hitting them, making friendships with other kids, how long the way to school is, everything. I literally sat there for more than 20 minutes hear the boy explain his school life. Then he casually walks away. His father comes back. I tell him about the nice stories his kid have and his reply, the kid never went anywhere near any school or even a nursery. My cousin when I was little, but not as little as him, went to his dad and told him that he needed to eat some ice cream because he had fallen over onto the radiator and the hot had got in his mouth and he needed ice cream to cool it down. I would have given him a plain ice cube to suck on. I don't think I'm going to be a very fun dad. When I was 6 I put grass in my mom's bed because I was mad at her for something. When she asked about the grass I said, but how did you know it was me? I had a younger brother but he was still a baby. The all green sheets. This happened today. I suppose it's a lie. My not quite 2-year-old daughter is not supposed to bang on a display cabinet I have. She was sitting by the sliding glass doors drawing with her wax crayons for glass. When I heard the slight vibration of the glass display, I got up to take away the crayons. The consequence, and she willingly handed them over. She then promptly bolted for the recliner I had just vacated, shouting my chair while laughing hysterically. Thief. Your daughter is going places. I have these 2 kids in my preschool who I love very deeply, but they're also incredibly manipulative. They want to lie and argue about everything. Watching them interact when this is happening is mesmerizing. In our class, we have a giant spool of string for arts and crafts. Now, the rule is that if you want string, you have to ask a teacher to cut some off for you. Because when they decide to cut it off themselves, they'll cut off like 10 feet of string to tie together these 2 sheets of notebook paper. Nope. This first kid, we'll call him Evan, has already had a lot of string that he's not using. He asks me for more. I say no, you have more than enough. Comments fit. However, I am the weathered Berlin Wall of this preschool. I bend for no one. Eventually, he wanders away. Later, I notice he seems to have mysteriously doubled his amount of string. I realize what has happened. We have a student who has autism and a very short attention span who seems to suddenly be missing all of his string. I have seen him do this kind of thing before to this kid, who he's well aware won't notice the missing string for a long time. I say, very casually, Evan, I notice you have a lot more string than you did before. I really hope you didn't steal it from somebody else. Immediately, the waterworks are coming. The other one I mentioned at the beginning, we'll call him Eric, is standing next to us. Evan, no, that was my string. It's all just my string. You just didn't see it all before. I didn't steal anything. I tease mine. Eric, he took it from student with autism. I saw him. Evan, tears increasing. Feet stomping. No, he's trying to get Emmy in trouble. This is my string. I cut it all by myself. That's where I got it from. He's lying. Me. Eric, did you really see him take the string? Eric, shrugging. I guess he cut it by himself. Evan, yes I did. Me, that's interesting, because the only way you can get string is by asking a teacher. You asked me, and I said no. So if you cut it by yourself, you would have broken the rules and disobeyed me. Is that what happened? Evan, no, he's lying again. I didn't cut it. I found it on the floor. My girlfriend enjoys working with kids like this. I don't get it. No, mummy, I didn't do a poo. Your bulging pants tell a different story, sweetie. My 17-month-old daughter usually lets us know as soon as she drops one by quietly muttering poo up to herself. It's hilarious, then terrible. We have a home video of my little brother making the most outrageous lie of all time. He is like 3, sitting on the floor. There is poster paint all over him, all over the floor, all over everything, even in his mouth. Nobody but my mum and him are home. Did you open the paint? No. Please give us that video. This is the opposite of what you're asking for, but I want to share it anyway. I got caught in high school staying up late on the phone with a kid that had moved out of state. I never slept very well, so I would just stay up on the phone instead. Anyway, like I said, my mom caught me by looking at our phone bill and I simply tried to deny the whole thing. Stupidly enough, so she called my dad, who also lived out of state, to see what she should do. He actually told her it was him that I was up talking to every night. She knew immediately that it wasn't, because like I said, she had the phone bills with the phone number on it and all. To this day I've never said anything to my dad about it, so I still don't know his reasoning for doing it, but I seriously appreciate his failed attempt to lie for me. My little sister has always been rather obsessed with money. She'd hoard any change from the couch cushions like she was freaking Smorg. But eventually it wasn't enough and she had to have more from our mom's purse. When she was busted, she tried to blame it on our cat, Dot, and I said no Shauna, that's mama's purse. But she out her whittle paw in there anyway and took the money, and I said bad Shauna, she was a devious one. I used to be obsessed with money as well, as I wanted $1 million for a motorhome. I even had a friend that I would scheme with such plans as digging a giant pit with alligators so people would fall in and we would be able to pickpocket everyone. When my sister was younger, she got busted for cutting her own hair and making a mess of it. She got sent to her room because she wouldn't admit it was her. About an hour later, my mum asked if she has anything to say, and she said, "I'm still thinking." "No mum, I don't need to pee," said while his white shorts are mysteriously turning wet and pale yellow. Now. I have a 2-year-old and a 4-year-old. I came downstairs to see what my kids were doing. When they've been quiet for a long time, you know they've been up to no good. They had emptied out their art supplies and were drawing all over the wall. I asked the 4-year-old what had happened and he blamed it on his brother. Of course. I should add that this is actually the first time he learned he could blame his brother for something. I started to believe him until I started to notice some fairly well written numbers toward the top of the drawing. So once again I asked him and he denied it even after I pointed out the numbers. He claimed that his 2-year-old brother suddenly knew how to write numbers and letters. Your 2-year-old will grow up, wasting his superior mind while his sister resents him forever. I once told a 2nd grade teacher that my parents were never around and I had to protect my sister with my laser eyes. I crap you not. This be called Child Protection Services and my parents were nearly arrested. The funniest thing was that my mom helped in the teacher's room like once a week. My friend had to deal with DCF a few months ago because his 6-year-old told her teacher she lived alone with a dog. When I was 5 I woke up in the middle of the night, having to poop really bad. I thought to myself, why should I have to walk all the way to the bathroom to poop when there's a perfectly good corner in my room? My mom comes to wake and immediately notices my misdeed and asks me where it came from. I blamed it on her whiner dog. She may have believed me if my crap hadn't been so abnormally large. My eldest child runs up to me and says whatever younger sibling's name tells you is a lie. I babysit this 3-year-old who lies constantly when it comes to eating food. I'll sit her and her sister down for dinner and the 3-year-old will take one bite and say, "I'm sick, my tummy hurts." Her older sister tells me not to believe her and that she is lying. One day I got tired of trying to convince the 3-year-old to eat, so when she told me she felt sick I jumped into mother mode. Started feeling her head to see if she had a temperature. Pretended to go and look for some medicine and told her I was going to call the hospital. She had a well frick sort of look on her face for a minute, then suddenly said, "I feel better now." Mom, everyone failed that test. It was so hard. Every kid at least once. When having lobster, my 5-year-old cousin said he didn't like lobster. When asked how he possibly could know that, he claimed that they had eaten it at his kindergarten. Or heck, my little princes and princesses lie their asses off on a daily basis, but for the most part currently, all of them being under 10, I simply follow up my first question with, "Really, is that the truth or are you lying?" and I can know immediately. Every now and then I flat call them out. "Why don't you try that answer again? Mama's getting real tired of your crap, Susie." My 2 daughters shared a bedroom for many years. One day, we discover someone had been carving my youngest's name into the bed, directly above where she slept. It was a bunk bed. My youngest maintained that it had not been her for so long that my oldest started to think maybe she had done it, though she of course couldn't remember when, why, or how. After like a month or 2, my youngest finally admitted it by saying something like, "I bet whoever did it is sorry." My brother had a huge project due soon, and his grades were shite. He was grounded, but he told my mom he was going to the library to work on his project. My mom knew what he was up to. A couple hours later she drives over to the library and calls him on his cell saying she wanted to come visit him. After trying to lie his way out of it again, he finally admitted that he was over at his girlfriend's house. My mom is smug to this day. My youngest son started walking when he was about 9 months, super early, because he spent the whole time chasing his older brother. When he was 10, we were home by ourselves, and I was cooking lunch in the kitchen. I saw him toddle down the hallway out of my sight, and stuck my head around the corner to check on him. Just then, He carefully got down on his knees, lay down on his belly, and started yelling like he'd fallen. And that was the very first lie he's told me. Sadly not the last. Background. My parents divorced when I was 5. I am the brother in this situation. But when I was 6 or 7, I was staying at my mom's house for a week. But my brother, who was 8 or 9, was at our dad's house. My dad was cleaning one of the bathrooms, and when he got to cleaning the toilet he realized that the seat was covered in pee, which wasn't uncommon due to my brother being a lazy bastard and would just urinate on the toilet seat and never bothered to put it up. Normally my dad would yell at both of us when this happened, and usually my brother would convince him it was me, using his more developed brain to outwit me. Despite it was never me, he yelled to my brother who peed on the seat, knowing full it was him. Right away his brotherly instincts kicked it. Walk-up 0T did it. My dad replies Walk-up 0T hasn't been here for a week. My brother is silent for a few seconds then responds with the genius "Oh, it was Walk-up 0T's ghost." My dad was laughing so hard at his stupidity he didn't even continue yelling at him. RIP in peace OP. Not a parent but older brother. When my 6-year-old brother was confronted by mom for burning bread on the stove, he blamed our uncle who he met just the year before and was living halfway around the world. When we were younger I convinced my little brother that my parents were gonna send him away and that if they loved him they'll allow him to come back home. I told him I went through it already and that his turn was coming up. I could see his eyes start to water and immediately told him I was kidding, but he really believed me and ran downstairs crying to my parents. My older sister did this to me and now I am doing it to my younger sister. When I was younger and still learning English, my older sister convinced me that PETA meant people eating tasty animals. I didn't find out the truth until around high school. Now my youngest sister is in the same boat as I was, but I think she's going to figure it out sooner than I will. Haha. In elementary school my older sister and I tried to convince the youngest that infantry was a place where they keep infants. Unfortunately, she was pretty bright and figured from the context of what she was reading that it wasn't. I'm not a parent, but my brother was once watching the show the family was going to watch together. We were supposed to save it until my mom got home. My mom gets home, sees my brother, and asks, "Are you watching?" Show we were going to watch. My brother says no while the TV was playing IT. Your mom asked a stupid rhetorical question. I have 6-year-old twins girls. When they were around 4 one of them drew 2 circular somethings on my kitchen wall. I tried asking who was responsible and got the "I didn't do it" line. At one point I started yelling for their father saying "Come see the circles your kids drew on the wall." That's when one of them said they are bunnies. I work at an after-school program with kindergartners and first graders. One of my kids is super smart and lies all the time to mess with people, which I find hilarious. We were hanging out coloring pictures and talking a while ago, and this girl, she is white, just organically and totally believably tells the other kids that Barack Obama is her dad and keeps coloring. The other kids were like, "No he's not," and she looked confused and was like, "Yeah, haven't you seen him pick me up?" This is where I chimed in and was like, "Yeah, he just picked her up Monday. You didn't notice?" And we convinced all the other kids that Obama was her dad for the rest of the day. You're creating a monster. I was making dinner, heard a little fuss between my 4-year daughter and 2-year son. I look over, she whacks him in the head. When I asked her about it, she told me I didn't hit him, his face accidentally ran into my hand. It's really hard to punish your child when you're too busy laughing at the crazy crap that comes out of her mouth. At the age of 6, I cut off my own bangs. It was a really attractive hairstyle, sort of a reverse mullet, and when my furious parents asked me what happened, I panicked and told them the teacher did it. My parents, intrigued by this strange account of events, then asked me why my teachers would cut off 100% of my bangs, to which I immediately responded, "Hair sample," and then, surprisingly enough, I got a spanking. You have been visited by the fashion doggo. Comment your envy strengthens me so you always look beautiful. Like and subscribe you magnificent person.